impacted property owners were co-defendants and read the judgment now 7+ years old. All the pre-existing roads were determined to be public roads, being 66 feet total width section line roads. Simply put, all the destruction done by the Bowdens required the Bowdens to remove all of their choice of impediments and total crap off the entire pre-existing roadway. It is now worse. Again, we are 7+ years from that court order, and 8 impacted property owners in the state of Michigan and the township 40 acres cannot gain vehicular access to their titled property. Also, just so you know, I am not charging anybody for what I am committed to do. I won't stop until that circuit court order is complied with. I got a second page if I can get it open. I cannot understand why this Bowden Road destruction issue is now 7+ years since the Circuit Court order of June 13th, 2013 is not being complied with, and the public 66-foot section line road has more damage than in 2013 when I was hired by this governing body to identify just what the Bowdens chose to do. And it's gated again. With my 58 years of practicing my professional land surveyor license, one solution which I was involved in Arizona, being I was licensed in Arizona, Colorado, New Mexico, and Michigan, was a mobile home unit was found in violation of the park rules and requirements and would be fined $5,000 a day for not starting to remove it and continue to dismantle it until it was removed. This circuit court order being very specific in the very first sentence, then who is to do what couldn't be more clear. My question to you is simply why 7+ years and 8 impacted property owners cannot gain vehicle access to their titled property? Why? Money does not buy me. I choose to do what is right. I have a copy of the court order and my comment period. Where do I put it?
Go ahead and hand it to Mr. Schaefer.
Pardon
or
me?
Mr. Nordine.
I can take it, yeah.
Any questions of me?
No. Dick,
My 4 minutes up?
are you counting the township as one of the 8 property owners?
Well, the 40 acres,
We
They
don't
have
own
to-
that. We don't own that.
well, it's identified as yours on the plat book, so. Anyway, the township was the petitioner of the original court order.
All right, thank you very much.
I thank you.
Any other cards?
I have Paul Rakowski.
Paul Rakowski, Oscoda, Oak Street. I've got one comment and 2 questions. And I would like at the end of my time for you to let me know if you're going to address my questions or what I need to do to get them answered. So that's what I would ask you to respond to me with at the end of my time. My first comment is related to the supervisor, Super Weed, who, while the board meetings were going on remotely, he attacked our township treasurer. And I thought that was extremely unprofessional to use government time to make a political attack against who's going to be your opponent in the upcoming election. So I just take exception to the way you handled yourself in that. And I just hope the rest of the people take note about how that person handled government time. The second thing I have is a question. and it was related to where the township stands with the investigation of their contamination sites. One at the dump and one at the wastewater treatment plant. I was at a meeting, the Air Force meeting, through Zoom, and I asked a question about that, and Super Weed gave a response that was untruthful, related to the township. The township's wastewater treatment plant. The wastewater treatment plant has been discharging PFCs into the groundwater for years. He alleged that that was leftover contamination from the Air Force. And the reality is the Air Force closed that plant down, totally dismantled the lagoon systems, and removed any potential residual contaminants of PFCs from the plant. And he implied that it was in the seepage beds, but the actual problem is discharging from the treatment plant. The water that's coming out of the treatment plant before it gets into the seepage beds is contaminated with PFCs, according to the township's sampling that was done. So I would like to know, what is the update? I think you said that there was going to be a investigation done, but you were waiting for the state to step in and pay for it. Not sure how that works, but I would like an update on where that stands. And the last thing is, I'm wondering if we're going to be, us township taxpayers are going to be getting a rebate on our taxes from the schools not being open for the last 3 months. That's roughly 1/3 of the school year, and your budget includes costs that were not incurred. Namely, for example, busing costs, subcontract costs, utility costs that are a lot lower. We all paid our taxes in good faith to you based on what you came up with in terms of, or the township or the board, whoever come up with the school board budget. And we paid that, and you didn't incur those costs. So I'm wondering if you're gonna reimburse those costs back to the taxpayers. And that's not just a simple yes or no answer. I would like to see the numbers as to how much you budgeted for the those costs, all costs during the school year, and how much you actually incurred, so the taxpayers know how much money you saved by closing the schools down. So that's all I have, and I'd like to know if you're gonna answer me tonight, or if you're gonna, I have to do something else to get an answer.
Any other cards?
I have Larry Holland for communications.
Good evening, everybody. Larry Holland, Oscoda resident. Communications. I love that word because that's the business I'm in, is communications, technology. Things that allow instantaneous communications at a click of a button. So imagine that we're going to have a massive, unprecedented fireworks display in Oscoda for July 4th. And imagine that emails internally that I acquired through the use of Freedom of Information Act requests, in which Mr. Nordine responded perfectly to. Says, email number 1, June 25th, internal document going back and forth asking about bathrooms. July 1st, July 2nd, more inquiries back and forth about bathrooms. But on the Facebook page that announces what the township's doing on June 24th, says the fireworks are on, and also come support about another event. It wouldn't have been very difficult to let everybody know that there's not going to be any bathrooms, because the splash pad was still running, but there's no bathrooms to wash your hands, no bathrooms to use the toilets, no sanitizer, and even though people were trying to social distance, we just didn't have access to bathrooms unless it was pushed back on the business owners. It would have been nice to proactively communicate to the business owners and let them know in advance to expect an influx of potential bathroom usage. Common courtesy, proactive leadership, making ideas happen through proper execution. That's what I expect from a township government. I expect people to communicate. I expect it to be thoughtful communication. I expect it to be planned out. Because God knows that if I decided that I wanted to do an event, I'd have to have a toilet plan. If I wanted to do an event, I would need to have my insurance papers all up to date, and part of my plan would have all of the details encompassing what's going to happen a week in advance or more. So there's all these opportunities, which kind of made me think, who runs the social media page for the Charter Township of Oscoda? Well, through the use of the Freedom of Information Act request, I got the name of Tammy Klein, who is the designated person to do the updates on the particular Facebook page. Great. Maybe provide that employee with some proper direction so that proactive notifications can go out at the bare minimum. I know that there's an email list with some business owners on it. You know, utilize something like that. Proactive. Be consistently proactive, because we have to plan these events out, and we can't just, I think it was late last year, I made the comment about the fiber optic networks taking so darn long to get installed for the Charter Township of Oscoda. So I decided to just deploy a fiber optic network, and it took me 45 days, and I cut over and it was fine, and I had to run all the way through the middle of town, all the way down, tear up a sidewalk, put the sidewalk back in, and got it done in 45 days. And I think that one of the board members said something, you know, we're just not some business that can just do whatever we want. We got to go through and do all of these things. And I'm paraphrasing, but it's close to accurate in what was said to me. So I'm not a township government, but, you know, so I just can't deploy an event without the use of toilets. So I would expect the same in kind, so that when I decide to go down to the beach, I know if I can use the bathroom or not, or plan accordingly. So that's all I have to say, other than it was a great fireworks show. Other than that, thank you.
Thank you. Any others?
I have Clayton Jolly.
My name's Clayton Jolly, and I am a resident of Loud Drive. And I have a problem with the fact that there has been very little, if any, information coming from this governing board about if I can get my water tested. Where can I get my water tested? Do I need to hook up right now? Can I wait a while? What's the cost going to be to me? Why isn't the township going to defray the cost and pass it on to the Secretary of the Air Force? I can't do that. I'm pretty sure he's not going to want me to send my water bill to him, but I'm going to have somebody pay it, because my well was perfectly all right until the Air Force fouled the water. Nobody on Loud Drive that's got or going to have a contaminated well water has anybody who they can reach out to and say, make me whole again. And I really haven't noticed, seen, or read anything about this governing board of this township giving me relief from that. You're supposed to be my protector, and I'm paying you taxes to help. Part of governing is protecting your community. You got a police force to keep the crime down. But a crime was committed by, as far as I'm concerned, a greater force than our police force can handle. And you've all let me down, every one of you. We've only had one person really step up from this community, and that person was not a member of this governing board, but a citizen with concerns. She's reached out and gotten some help, assistance, notification to the federal government, who should be making the remunerations to all of us. And eternally, as far as I'm concerned, because as far as I'm concerned, for the 25 years I've lived on Loud Drive, my water's been good. Now you tell me it's not going to be good, and that's just my tough luck. That isn't right, and I'm here to tell you all that, and I hold you all responsible for making a right thing happen. You're my local government. If I can't trust you to go to bat for me, how do I get any help? That's all I got to say. I'd like some answers to those questions. somewhere, sometime. And I'm pretty sure a lot of people along Log Drive would like some answers to those questions too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others?
I got Mark Miller about the 2019 audit.
Is he in the other room?
Mark? Oh, he's coming.
Can I take the mask off or do I? Okay. That way I can't say I was an imposter. Everybody's pretty agitated tonight, so let's start with something simple. Last year, Mr. Bauer talked about the annual performance review. Too many questions, too many same. I'll reach out to PricewaterhouseCoopers in Detroit, see if we can get a partner review form and send it up to Mr. Weed and see if that's easier. My main comment tonight is about the audit and the history of the audit over the past, I'm looking at 2009. There's been a lot of hullabaloo and chatter, social media, paper, and I appreciate the council broadcasting this and having it available for replay, so it's available without editing. I started my career in 1978 with PricewaterhouseCoopers. Your kids and grandkids know them as the Oscar CPAs. Their bread and butter is audit and tax and some management consulting. We should not have the issues that we've had the past few years. Mr. Cummings talked about it the past 2 years. Mr. Weed made it an issue. But basically, we should have one audit comment, and that comment is that the CPA firm does the grouping for the financial statements. None of these other audit comments, inability to reconcile the bank timing, billing fees, journal entries, should be happening. And the interesting thing is, and I may be wrong, because I was pretty excited when I put together the spreadsheet, back in 2015 for the audit, which was released on June 2nd, we only had one comment, and that comment was about the financial statements. And it's not worth us to pay Jamie to go to school and learn to do that grouping for something she only has to do once a year. The external CPA firms, they have that expertise and they do that for multiple municipal clients here in Oscoda and the surrounding communities. Why that's important is we've been selected here in Oscoda to be the horizontal launch site for the state of Michigan. And when Boeing, Lockheed, Virgin, and the other aerospace companies show up here, you want them to say, this is a good place. I can see living here. I can see my kids going to school here. You do not want them to think that we're the Beverly Hillbillies of Upper Michigan or the Cheech and Chong show. So you have the choice in the primary Tuesday, August 2nd, and here's the same form I last handed out the past 2 years updated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any others?
Have Mimi McDonald.
I'm Amy McDonald. I noticed the treasurer is upset about the supervisor bringing this information to the public, who are their constituents. But she isn't saying that the information's untrue or in any way incorrect, so I question what the real issue is, other than it being an election year. It is also the board's responsibility to keep the public informed on the workings of the township government. And I also have to ask, after the treasurer being in this position for almost 20 years, why she would need a paper invoice to know when she has to pay a monthly bill, as in the cemetery payments to Oscoda. In her personal life, she has monthly bills that don't send an invoice. Does she remember to pay those? Is it true that after almost 20 years, she still codes invoices incorrectly, such as receivables to an expense account? And she doesn't catch when others code wrong because she expects the auditors to catch everything at the end of the year? After almost 20 years on the job, does she understand that giving the township board and department heads incorrect account budget information throughout the year is crucial for the efficient running? We need the correct information for efficient running of the government. Waiting for the auditors at year end to correct simple errors in accounts that she should have caught are costing the taxpayers thousands in audit fees and potentially overspending by the department heads that are using her incorrect accounting figures, such as in the zoning department, $680,000 in an equipment account that should have been $500.
Thank you. Any others?
That's all.
All right, the consent agenda. Anything regarding the meeting minutes of June 22nd and the work session minutes of June 24th? Any comments for the payment of bills? $271,271.30.
Yes, I have a comment, question. I brought this up last Friday at our pre-board meeting about the payment. This is on page 25 of the packet. Payment to liquid calcium chloride sales. And it was listed in the packet in terms of pounds. And our contract with LCC is in gallons. So as a trustee, one of the, in my opinion, the main responsibility I have as a trustee is to oversee the spending of the township. So when I looked at this, there's no way that I can confirm that these amounts are correct. So I asked Ms. McGuire about that on Friday, and she mentioned then that that was the way the invoice came, was with pounds. But she subsequently sent me an invoice, and I appreciate you sending that the one invoice, and then I subsequently asked for the other two. And it clearly shows on the invoice that there's pounds, gallons, and the rate per gallon. Now I know, since I was in the trucking business, I know why they have to have pounds on there. They have to know how much weight is on their truck. But in looking at the invoices, and Ms. McGuire also sent me an email from her deputy, which says one of the invoices, there either is a lack of a signature or it's a signature that she couldn't recognize. To me, it looked like it was an X where somebody was supposed to sign, but I have no idea. So in the email, it says that so to find out if that was ours, she contacted the company to see if that was our invoice. Well, to me, that's kind of like asking the fox if all the hens are in the hen house. But the other problem with this is that of the 3 invoices, which clearly have the gallons, and 2 of them are correct, the third one is billed at 58 cents a gallon as opposed to 55, which the troubling part for me was I was concerned that it was on the packet, it was listed in pounds. If it had been listed in gallons, I'm not sure that I would have caught that we were going to pay the wrong amount. We're actually going to pay more than what we should have been paying. And so I just wonder if the treasurer's office takes any action to look at these bills, because they're the last in the line. They're the ones that actually write the check. If they do any checking on the bills to assure themselves that the amount is correct. Now, I know that other people handle these invoices and code them, but the treasurer is the last one in line that actually writes the check. So is there any checking of these bills to see if the amount is right, based on what the contract that we're dealing with is?
First of all, I didn't say that Friday about the pounds on the bill. I said I didn't have the invoice in front of me and I would have to look for it, and actually I had to remind you of that twice. Second of all, the email that you're talking about to Jane, she sent that to Tammy to ask, because she didn't recognize the departments, which would be DPW, and then Tammy responded by saying code it to these things and to approve to code it and pay it. I don't know why Jane would send it to the company. They don't know who is signing it.
The email from Jane says, I called LCC just to make sure it was our.
To make sure it was our
ours.
bill.
Yeah.
That's what it was, not the signature on there. She was asking Tammy about the signature on the bill and where to code it to.
She called LCC to see if it was our bill.
Correct. And they said yes, and then she forwarded it to Tammy to get the coding.
I would, if you call a vendor and they send us an invoice, I would expect that they would say, yes, it's our bill. But that's like asking the fox if the chickens are in the hen
But
house.
it's not like she just tried to pay it though. On top of it, she contacted
I'll give her
Tammy.
credit. I'll give her credit for at least
Well, I'm glad.
seeing that the signature wasn't there, and that she did some follow-up on it, but in my opinion,
And
she
Bill,
followed up to the wrong person.
let me ask you this. Well, no, it isn't the wrong person. Tammy codes those and has coded them in the past. Who
I'm
else
not
is
talking
she
about
gonna?
Tammy, I'm saying she called LCC to verify if this was our invoice. She
Okay.
should have contacted the DPW to see if it was our invoice.
Either way, it's our invoice. And she found out it was our invoice. And in regards to the 58 cents, how would Jane have any idea what we're supposed to pay per pound?
That's your
Honestly.
job.
That is not my job. That is the department's job that codes it and says it's okay to pay. I don't know how many times I have said in public that when the bills get to the treasurer's office, they are supposed to be ready to be paid. Have we caught stuff that there's a mistake? Absolutely. Things that have been quoted wrong, things that have been, that shouldn't have been ours, those type of things with different vendors like Asabo, hardware, those type of things, that she's caught it and said, no, that's not ours, that's not anybody from DPW's, it must belong to somebody else. We do everything in our power to try to catch any other mistakes or something that somebody overseen. But when the department head says, here's my signature, this is where to code it to, they are saying that bill is ready to be paid. That is not the accounts payable's job.
So as the chief financial officer, you take no responsibility on whether or not, even though somebody made a mistake or didn't see that you're just gonna pay it blindly without any question?
We do everything in our power to try to make sure that it's getting paid correctly.
Well, apparently not, because if I hadn't
That's
caught
ridiculous.
this, if I hadn't seen this being in pounds, if it'd been listed in gallons, we would have been approving
It's still,
the
if you
payment of
look,
bills with the wrong amount.
But forgive me, you're gonna wanna look at the bill again, because it shows it in pounds, and right next to it, it shows it in gallons.
I know. I
They're
understand
giving
that.
you the breakdown, and then it's telling you the price in gallons. So
Yes,
there's
I
no
know.
problem with the first two bills,
So
it's
why
just
wouldn't
the
you put
one
the
for the
gallons on
58
here
cents.
instead of pounds, number one? So that when I look
Are
at
you
this,
kidding
I
me
have
right now?
something,
Oh my
that
God.
I can go back and know the contract is at 51 cents a gallon.
How come you couldn't
And
come
I
in
can
and ask me
verify.
that question and look at the bill
I
yourself?
asked you, that's why I asked you Friday.
Okay, and I got back to you, and I
You
gave you
did.
the things, and I gave you the copies, and I asked, and showed you.
And clearly on the invoice, it has gallons, so why can't you put the gallons on there instead of pounds? Because having
Because
pounds.
either way, it's the same amount of money.
No, it is not. Because I have no way of verifying when it's in pounds, if it's the rate on our contract is 51 cents a gallon,
Oh
not
my-
51 cents
okay.
a pound.
Well, you know what? We haven't paid that bill yet, so, and the one that needs to be corrected has been pulled out to be adjusted.
Okay. But it's just
I'll
troubling to
have
me.
her,
that
I will
it's-
have her change the description from pounds.
It's
to gallons.
Well, on the last payment of bills, it wasn't in gallons. And it's just troubling to me that our chief
But the
financial
amount-
officer takes no
Oh my God,
responsibility for
whatever.
anything financial.
Bill, the Friday meetings start at 9 o'clock, is that right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and you get your board packet on Thursday.
Yeah. We're packing on Thursday, so you had the second half of Thursday, almost all of Friday and today to go in and talk to her about this.
Well, I talked to her on Friday, and she provided me with the one,
Yeah, but you still have questions. You still have a reason to talk to her. You still have questions that you're voicing here now.
Right, he was in the building twice.
But I think the rest of the board has a right to understand what the problems I'm having with this. Because the rest of the trustees should be verifying this as well. And
I got a telephone.
if we can't depend on what's on here, I'm asking myself now, how many of these things in the past have we overpaid a bill that I wasn't able to catch?
I'll tell you
I have
this.
no idea.
I'll tell you this. We've caught where we were paying from the previous people, if you want to go back and look, and I've said this before too. I don't like to point fingers, but in this instance, I'm going to. Before we took over the accounts payable, we were paying our own water bills late, okay? Paying penalties, our own water bills. So I think we've come a long way from the previous clerk's office that was handling the accounts payable at the time. We also caught where the attorney got overpaid. We also caught the fact that the waste management, their prices went up when nobody else caught it and was holding those bills until Dave could handle that, and that's why they're being paid 4 or 5 months late. But had that got paid, you would have been the first one saying it's the treasurer's fault because the bill got paid late, 4 months late. Well, it is in that case because we caught it that that the price had gone up. We do everything in our power. We spend $14 million writing out checks for our vendors every year. And bottom line, with our new software program that's coming in, where the buck starts is the department heads. They know their budgets, they know what they're spending. They're the ones coding and approving the bills, bottom line. Again, are we the last stop? Absolutely. But we are not the beginning and the end for the problems.
Any other comments on the payment of bills? Is there a motion
For what?
for the consent agenda?
My financial report's in there. Nobody had any questions about that? I know that Bill had questions about that Friday. He mentioned the fact that we have some CDs that are coming up. There's actually we are at $8.7 million, approximately, $1 million in our investment portfolio. He questioned the fact that we have quite a bit of them coming due in August. And he wanted to know that maybe we should keep out money for some of the projects that we have coming up. But that's what I let them know at the first quarter, that I increased the money into our Michigan class account of $1.7 million in order to look forward to those payments that will be coming out. Our Michigan class has approximately 43% of our investment money in it. It's a little high for me to have it there, but with the projects coming up, that's what that was the goal, was to be able to have that money there and ready to be able to spend for the water projects that we have coming online. I do want to note, for the public, if anybody had a chance to look at it, we had some really good interest rates for a while, but as everybody knows, it was all tanked. And so my ladder approach, I'm doing closer to 90 days, a shorter frame, so that I can look forward to getting a little bit higher interest rate in the future. So some of them have dropped from a 2.50 down to a 0.10, unfortunately. But hopefully that won't last for long. Also, I want to mention, in 18 years of being treasurer and all the classes that I've taken in the investments, they teach you safety, diversity, and yield, always. You don't ever chase the yield, ever. So that's just one thing that I wanted to bring up. In the first quarter reporting, first of all, I want to note that some people had questions about the Appropriations Act and my financial obligations, so-called. If you read the Appropriations Act, I only have to report for the first 3 quarters, not for the last quarter. So I know maybe people didn't understand that, so that's why there wasn't a fourth quarter report for me. The first quarter one's a little bit late. COVID, couple different things happening. But I wanted to note, nobody had any questions about that. But one of my obligations in the Appropriations Act is to tell you a little bit about the fluctuations there and the revenues and the expenditures and the ups and downs of it. So if you look at the first quarter financial report, and I don't know if anybody else has it online they want to look at, in the revenues, the general fund was up about $150,000, and that was due to the closure of some of the funds in 101 that we talked about previous with the budget. We were down in Fund 203, which is a road improvement fund, about $40,000, and that's because it wasn't transferred from the common account, or common, I keep calling it common, from the general fund 101 yet. In 236, we were down, which is property O&M, and that's due partially to not receiving some of the rent money and also sale of fixed assets that were reported in 2019, so that made a little more increase than what really happened in 2020. In the water fund, we were down, and that's because we had more money that was coming in the wellhead grant and USDA money in 2019 for phase 1 projects that we have online. In expenses, 2006, our fire truck, we purchased a fire truck, so that was up. 591 water, we were down in expenses, and that's due to the engineering USDA water main also. Also 101, I noted here that it wasn't a big jump, but we were up a little bit, and that's because of the $47,000 that we purchased the snow blower in and closing of funds into 101. So that was it for the first quarter. I did not add the second quarter one to the agenda, so I don't know if I'm allowed to speak to that or if I'll have to wait till the next meeting to get that approved under the consent agenda. But I just want to note that I did get it finished, and I got it finished 7 or 8 days ahead of last year. So I'll wait and report on that when it's actually on the agenda.
So is this report showing actual cash balances in the accounts?
Nope, and the Appropriation Act does not say that I need to report cash balances. It says budgetary amounts. If you would like cash balances, I'd be happy to provide them if the board would like them. I'm not really sure what the necessity of that is, because you're not gonna be able to tie it to any numbers, but if that's what the board would like, I would be happy to provide that.
Does anybody have anything else for the consent agenda? Is there a motion for the consent agenda?
Yeah, I move that we accept the consent agenda as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byer, support by Ms. McGuire.
Can I ask a question? What are we doing about the payment of the bills on the one bill that's over what it's supposed to be?
As I mentioned, we pulled it out and won't be paid until it's
So
corrected.
that's not part of this consent agenda?
We're pulling it out of the check run, and it won't be paid until it's corrected.
So then the amount that we have to approve here tonight needs to be reduced?
Correct.
Is that a thing? Okay. So the motion has it as presented.
So
So
you
we
need
add-
to change your motion.
Yeah, I move that we accept the consent agenda with the bill that we're talking about here that has not been paid and has been pulled out. So the final total is adjusted accordingly.
This invoice. $5,977.
Okay. You still support that?
Yes.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Byer, motion by Ms. McGuire. Roll call.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Ms. McGuire?
Yes.
Mr. Byer?
Yes.
Mr. Cummings?
Yes.
Mr. Palmer?
Yes.
Excuse me, Mr. Weed?
Yes, motion's passed. Subcommittee reports and project updates. First one is recap 2021 budget work session.
All right, so what you'll see in the board packet It starts on page 98, and our budget work session number 1 heavily focused on a water rate study. We had the financial advisor present to the township board. You will see the water rate study within the packet. Why that's important is because the financial advisors put together a test year. And so that test year is the basis for moving forward as far as what it's going to cost for operations of the water infrastructure. We have spent an enormous amount of time putting together the Water Asset Management Plan, or the WAMP, and that looked at all of the infrastructure needs for the to continue the water operations over the next 20 years. And the water rate study then shows the different options associated with paying for those infrastructure maintenance. As you know, the financial advisor states, there's 3 bad options with utilities, and it's drain your fund balance, take on debt, or raise the rates. And it's going to take a little bit of all 3 of those options moving forward. And so what this shows in your packet is a water rate study over the next 20 years, the combination of cash used and debt. There are 3 debt issuances throughout those 20 years, as well as the not only the impact on the fund balance, but the impact on the rates. So that was presented to the board, and we went over some of the framework as far as the some of the major capital improvement items. We do have a budget work session number 2 and a budget work session number 3. That'll be Wednesday, the 29th of June, and Thursday, the 30th of June, a Wednesday and a Thursday. Both of those budget work sessions are slated to be here at the library at 2 p.m. And those are basically updates 1, 2, and 3. We will be bringing in the department heads as usual. We have time slotted for them to be able to talk about their major capital improvement items, as well as the operational budgets for 2021, and get out ahead of that. We just finished the budget, so we start over with the budget process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick Freeman with Rowe to kind of give an engineering update for the month.
Good evening, Rick Freeman with Rowe Professional Services. Quick update on the engineering work we've accomplished over the last month. Phase 2 water main is up and operational. The main is active, it's been tested, and residents have the ability to now start making their service hookups. We sent out the letters to the interested parties, which were about 40 that had contacted us. Gave them John Henry Incorporated and Goyette Mechanical as 2 potential contractors they can work with, or a registered contractor of their choice. So we've had a few sound like they were going to start that process here shortly, and they will work through their contractor with F&B in the township to get those services up and running. Funding opportunities from the last meeting, the DWRF application has been submitted. We should hear back from them initially in late August, early September on the success of that application. The Clean Water State Revolving Fund Grant application is being finalized. That's due August 1st. We got a little bit of some work to do on that, just adding some information to the appendices and get that submitted. And that schedule for that will be probably about a month later than the DWRF as far as finding out on that. So late September, early October on that. We're finalizing the USDA RD ECWAG grant as we speak. That should be going in here before the end of the month. Sanitary sewer system improvements, based on the approval of the proposal at last month's meeting. We're starting the design startup on that. getting everything kind of organized from the SAW report and that. And we will get that rolling once we get a little bit more indication back on the SRF grant and how that's shaping up as far as the funding goes. Phase 1 water main assistance. John Henry is starting coordination with Whispering Woods. I was out there earlier today, and the Dig has been out there. I think John Henry's thinking about starting that probably the first or second week of August. On Whispering Woods, we have received receipt that the 2 other property owners have received the packets. Have not received the authorizations back from them yet, but we'll be reaching out to them shortly. And the goal there will be to obviously wrap that up this fall, because of the funding for that wraps up on the 31st of December of this year. Old Orchard Campground public dock erosion. We had submitted the plans out to Gary and Al. We got some initial comments back from them. We're addressing those now. And we'll be putting together the packet and bringing it to the board at your next meeting for authorization to go out for advertisement for fall construction on that shoreline erosion and the drainage up in the up above the beach area. Old Orchard Campground electrical upgrades, that project is completed and operational. Phase 3 trail project, we are researching all possible funding sources to close the gap on what the township's obligation would be for the full project out to the entrance of Old Orchard. And we've got several opportunities there to pursue with township guidance on that. So we'll be working with Mr. Schaefer on that here shortly. So everything else is pretty much on hold. I can answer any questions if anybody has any.
Have you guys pursued the Great Lakes Fisheries Grant Program?
We're looking into that, yes. Yep, as far as what we need to put together for that. What we put together last January for that Consumers Energy Planet project, the write-up for the trail, is basically adaptable to almost of those types of grants. So we're just tweaking it a little bit as far as what needs to be done and then finding out availability. One thing we have heard back from Consumers Energy is due to COVID, they have expended a lot of their grant funds this year on programs for the needs of the public and all that type of stuff. So there could be a little bit of a lull this year, but then they're anticipating the funding to be back in place for next year. So
When we were building the pier here 8 years ago or so, we, the consumers, muckety-muck, gave us a hint that, you know, that whole thing was geared to Lake Michigan when it started, but they had reached a saturation point for projects on the west side of the Lower Peninsula. Said, you guys need to try. Over $200,000 to build a pier.
Yep. And I remember you mentioned that before, so I got Doug Schultz looking into it as we speak. So
It's worth a little work.
Yep. So.
And phase 2 walkthrough, final walkthrough, the USDA is scheduled for next Tuesday.
Yeah, next Tuesday, we're gonna do the final walkthrough for phase 2 with the USDA, which will start the process of closing out the paperwork with them. The only thing that really needs to be done out there is the contractor's waiting for his subcontractor to come in and do the asphalt drive approaches, and then there's 2 or 3 patches on the road that need to be taken care of. So, and we're staying on him to try to make sure that he keeps up with the gravel so we don't have any more property damage out there. So, and he was actually out there with when that one property owner or car owner hit that. So he was actually able to transfer information even that same day.
Okay.
So, but.
Rick, on the phase 3 trail, do you have any idea when we might hear from MDOT on the TAP grant?
Well, we heard it was going to be sometime this month, but there's questioning on the township's commitment, from what I understand.
Yeah, if you look, Rick did a real nice job of laying it out as far as the phase 3. You can look at 107. of the packet. For the version, there's two versions of the Phase 3. The first ends at Foot Village near Ray Road.
Right.
Okay, and so the township has already committed $200,000 to that project. Now, to take the project all the way to Old Orchard Park, that would require a commitment of $427,000 from the township. And before we commit more money, obviously we wanna exhaust all potential other sources. The FLAP grant and what he basically laid out is all of the different MEDC has a couple different options there through crowdfunding, the USDA potentially, the USDA rural development, and then CDBG. So there are different options in addition to the FLAP grant that we're going to go chase down before we commit. Yes. I wouldn't bring that request to the township board at this point to commit another $227,000 to a Phase 3 bike path project, and we need to be able to exhaust those resources.
And this is the year when the flap's available?
FLAP will be available the next fiscal year, so after October 1st.
Okay.
Yeah. And we can't, what we did find out is we can't use the FLAP grant to offset the local match on the TAP grant. It can work together, but it can't offset that. The other thing, Mr. Weed and myself had a conversation as far as capturing everything that the township has done in kind up to this point, and also coming up with a figure attached to that, and working with these different ones, MEDC and CBDG and all of that, to see where we can gain some leverage with those funds. So, and then there's several other, even consumers energy ones, like I said. The one thing we're hearing though, in general, is like MEDC and consumers, like I said, because of COVID, there's not a lot of excess funds sitting out there until probably the next fiscal year, which will be after October 1st.
Right.
So.
All right. Thank you.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, Mr. Rakowski had asked about where the township stands with the dump contamination, the wastewater treatment plant plume. So regarding an update on the old township dump, we did have to wait for Eagle to get back with us if they were going to help fund testing, putting in wells and testing to find out how we can bound that plume. Eagle got back with us not too long ago and said that they don't have the funds for that. So, because of the COVID thing, if it weren't for COVID, we probably had a good chance at it. So now we are working with AKT Peerless to work on a plan to have a certain number of acres tested, both on-site and off-site, to work on that bounding of the plume. We've gotten an initial price from them, but we've got some more information we need. And that would be a Phase 2 type testing, which means it'll be a full inventory of everything that's in that groundwater. Now, regarding the wastewater treatment plant, there is a very large and heavily contaminated plume coming off the drying beds from that plant. It heavily saturated with PFAS. And what's coming off those beds is not the townships. It tests a FFF signature. And Eagle found documents that showed that what was happening, and I've explained this before, so this is not the first time I've said this.
That's right.
Is that a lot of the AFFF that drained off of FT02 went down to an oil water separator. That oil water separator then dumped off into those drying beds. So it was essentially dumping straight PFAS into those drying beds for a lot of years. So that heavy plume, that's the Air Force's. And the Air Force has come back and claimed responsibility for it, but they have no plan for treating it at this point.
All right.
you want to address taxpayers' rebate for schools?
He's gonna have to contact the school board.
That's right.
That's an easy one.
Yep.
We do not manage the schools.
We do not determine when the schools will open, when they will close, their calendar, or any such factor involved.
Does anybody else have any project updates? All right. Purchase of 6 new portable radios for the police department.
All right. The packet contains a quote totaling $17,859.93 for 6 portable radios, chargers, and all accessories for the police department. Requesting a total of $18,110 to include the anticipated cost of shipping. These to be paid out of the Police Fund 207-000-980.000 for equipment. The current portable radios used by the police department are aging and well past their useful lives. Board members will note that the portable radios were listed in the 2020 Capital Improvement Plan. The packet also contains a detail of equipment purchases for the police department during 2020, split between the 3 funds dedicated to the police department. And this requires Township Board approval.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the $18,110 to purchase the new portable radios.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes. Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Request to increase 2020 appropriations for the police fund.
All right, so board members will remember action taken to appropriate $6,774 for the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265 during the last regularly scheduled board meeting, the 22nd of June. Your packet contains a detail of the revenues and expenditures for the Police Fund 207 and Police Staffing Fund 211 through the 7th of July, 2020. As discussed in the previous action item, the supporting documents detail a total of $39,245.20 to purchase 7 different items that are split between the 3 funds dedicated to the police department. The concept is to draw down the fund balance for the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265 to 0. More revenues and expenditures will not be coded to that fund until another drug forfeiture occurs. The Township Board would have to approve future appropriations associated with the Drug Law Enforcement Fund 265. The remainder of the proposed expenditures are detailed between the Police Fund 207 and Police Staffing Fund 211. To make these proposed purchases happen, I'm requesting the Township Board increase 2020 appropriations for the Police Fund 207 by $13,997, and that's to line 207-000-980.000 for equipment. From current $1,281,324 up to $1,295,321. Board members will note that the Audit Adjustment 39 from the 2019 audit report booked $14,082 against 2020 appropriations for Fund 207, associated with the retrofitting of a vehicle and software associated with the mobile data terminals, and that was e-citation. Board members will note that the increase to 2020 appropriations requested for the Police Fund 207 is less than the $18,082 associated with Audit Adjustment 39. The only other major purchase by the police department for 2020 will be the cruiser that's currently being retrofitted. So that's in Mount Pleasant right now. The cruiser will be paid out of the $34,500 remaining in line 207-000-981.000. And the police cruiser is set to be $33,089. And this increase in 2020 appropriations for the Police Fund 207 requires Township Board approval.
Comments? Is there a motion?
Yeah, I move that we approve the $13,997 to increase the 2020 appropriations for the Police Fund 207.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Cummings, support by Mr. Palmer. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Request to post for public safety clerical assistant position.
All right. Your packet contains the job description for the public safety clerical assistant position. Board members will note that this is not a new position, but backfilling a position that is currently vacant. In the previous action item, Police Fund 207 financial reports show that only 12.74% of the 2020 appropriations for the line 207-000-707.400 part-time clerical assistant have been spent, and it's over halfway through the year. The part-time position works for 24 hours per week. If approved, the plan would be to receive applications through Friday, the 14th of August, 2020, conduct interviews, and come back to the Township Board with a recommendation at the 24th of August regular board meeting. Posting for this position requires Township Board approval.
Comments?
Yeah, I'm curious, Bill, I'm wondering why you didn't ask for a time study for this position.
Do we need a time study for that?
Well, you wanted me to do one for the part-time person in my office.
Yeah, because I don't think you need 3 people in the treasurer's office. This is a position we had before, and
My position was the
Voting to fill it.
position we had before.
I didn't think you needed it then. Still don't think you need it, but the board can vote on that how they want.
Just wanted to be clear.
I'll make a motion to approve posting for the public safety clerical assistant position.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Authorize advertisement, RFP for solid waste disposal services.
All right, so your packet contains an RFP for solid waste disposal services, as well as a professional services contract agreement. If approved, potential respondents would have until Tuesday, the 28th of July, to ask questions, and until Wednesday, the 5th of August, to provide sealed bids. And the plan would be to present the Township Board with a recommendation at the 11th of August regularly scheduled board meeting, and this requires Township Board approval.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve advertisement for an RFP for solid waste disposal services.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Proposed changes to the superintendent's annual evaluation.
All right, your packet contains the superintendent's annual performance evaluation used last year. During the discussion, with the Township Board last year, discussion ensued that the 11-page document could be considered overwhelming and overkill for an annual performance evaluation. Discussion points also included the fact that not all Township Board members could provide ratings for all responsibility categories because this was not directly observed. Therefore, modifications are being presented to the Township Board for consideration as a more generalized forum for feedback to be provided to the superintendent. Your packet contains a proposed annual performance evaluation for the superintendent. The template is more in line with the previous annual performance evaluation prior to the introduction of the 11-page document. And the rating system, which is a 1 through 5, has not changed. And much like the current system, the proposed form calls for written comments on all 7 categories. Additional comments can also be provided at the end of the form if it's not covered in the categories. Ultimately, the members of the Township Board must write these annual performance evaluations, so feedback and discussion is required to move forward in the process. Exactly like the process used last year, each member of the Township Board would submit the annual performance evaluation to the supervisor to compile the results. Under this scenario, the township board members would have until Friday, the 14th of August, to submit their completed annual performance evaluations to the superintendent. The plan would be to present the compiled results during the 24th of August regularly scheduled township board meeting in line with the language contained within the superintendent's employment contract. And this requires township board approval.
Comments?
Yeah, I was one of the objectors a year ago, and I certainly appreciate this change. We've gone from 23 items to 7. Whoever's responsible for that, and I'm sure the supervisor had a big role in it. Good job.
Actually, I think Dave did the evaluation changes.
Yeah, I kind of gave a proposal as far as, hey, if you guys like this, fantastic. If not, let me know and I'll change the categories.
Good job.
Thank you, sir.
Well, like I said on Friday during the work session, I didn't have a problem with the original version. It really didn't matter. It gave me a sense of what was being evaluated and how it related to statute, which defines his job. I would fill it out once a year, whether it was a short or a long form, it didn't matter. I did them before and I continued to do them, and I haven't missed one yet, so there you go.
Well, we did discuss it on Friday, and I kind of said the same thing. It didn't really matter to me one way or the other. I would fill out whatever form we decide to use, but
Yep.
over the weekend, reviewing this some more, I guess I'm a little with Mr. Byer. I kind of like the 4-page form a little better. It's, I mean, there are room for comments and all the items and at the end, so I think I like that a little bit better, actually.
Yeah, fair point, Mr. Palmer. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make more paper out of this. I mean, I'm not into violating the U.S. Paper Reduction Act, but you know, I mean, I'm not going to vote against the shorter version. I just didn't have a problem with the original.
Right.
I think it's a little unethical that he's doing his own evaluation changes, but I guess that's just me.
Well,
Do you
any
find
of the
it-
board members could have developed their own evaluation forms on it. I had created one to follow statute by the letter. And I have no problem filling out that document. But, you know, Mr. Schaefer developed this one here, and if any board members want to make changes to it, then this was your time to bring them forward.
I didn't find any of the amendments or anything in the new version that was slanted. I mean, I don't think it's unethical at all. It's no different than somebody writing their own letter of reference and having their boss or somebody who'd previously worked with them, you know, sign it. It's not uncustomary at all. But I think it's a great effort on his part.
Oh.
Yeah.
Is there a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to approve the 4-page evaluation as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Oh, sure, I had at least one for.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
No.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. On to other, amended bylaws for the Planning Commission.
All right, so what you'll have in there, what you'll see in there, I think they changed 3 words. And I wanted to be able to bring it to the board's attention. There are changes. The Planning Commission has been through the bylaws exhaustively over the last several years. You will see page 162 of your packet. You see it's highlighted to read collectively and have a roll call vote for all conditions collectively. So that was the only change to number 9 as far as the yellow highlights in there. It does say 163, you have the alternate should take the vacant position while maintaining their original tenure. And then the only thing, again, is changing the date on 164. You will see the previously, it was adopted December 2nd of 2019, and again, these are proposed changes for July of 2020.
Comments? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve the amended bylaws of the Planning Commission as presented.
Support.
Motion by Mr. Palmer, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Decking at the Octagon Pavilion at Ken Ratliff.
All right, so this was a placeholder item. I emailed it out earlier this afternoon, and then I brought you the scanned version detailing $3,183.10. Treated lumber is really hard to come by at this point, and we have gone through the normal avenues as far as local suppliers and larger big box stores. And so unfortunately, what you're seeing there, it's coming from a mill out of Glenny, but the wood needs to be dropped in and treated in Saginaw. It needs to get soaked and then come up here to be delivered. So the most recent is a total of $3,183.10. I know it is under the $10,000 threshold. I wanted to let the board know that it would be paid out of General Fund 101-754, which is the cost center for the Ken Ratliff Memorial Park, 975.000. So based on conversations with the DPW, trying to be able to get different quotes, they feel that this is the best option. You do have other options in there associated with composite, to be able to have a frame of the treated lumber with an overlay of composite. What you can see in there is that gets very expensive very quickly. This is, $5,000 less. The treated lumber has served its purpose for a long time there, and they feel that this would be the best option and most cost-effective moving forward to replace that decking.
Comments?
Doesn't the composite decking tend to last longer? And you don't have any screws or nails coming out of the surface? At least the composite decking I'm familiar with, because I last year redid my deck with a composite, and it eliminated nails and screws on the surface, and it won't dry out, it can't dry out, it can't warp, it's almost indestructible, lasts forever.
And what you'll see in there is basically, it's page 168 in there, and that gets into, for 90 of those ASIC boards, which are the composite material, 90 of those boards to create that overlay are, it's priced at $5,399.10. But then that is the overlay. You still have to build the framework with the treated lumber before you have that composite overlay. So all totaled, you're looking at, $8,000 versus $3,183.10.
Something that would last longer, though, I believe, than treated lumber.
I get something like that. I would have to then ask the board to increase appropriations within the general fund for 101-754 under the $3,183.10 that can be completed under the current appropriations for 2020. So I want to give you the different options there. Based on conversation with the DPW, that's what they said they would recommend.
Any other comments? there a motion?
I move we go ahead with the, it's a low bid, right?
The $3,183.10.
And the mill from Glenny, what is the name?
The McGuire Mill out of Glenny.
No relation.
You sure?
I'm positive. If it is, it's X.
Is there support?
Support.
Motion by Mr. Byers, support by Ms. McGuire. Roll call?
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Employment probation period of Officer Von Heath.
All right, so what I sent out from the chief was the agenda addition that Officer Heath has successfully completed his 6 months, and the chief is making a recommendation to put him into full-time status and out of the probationary status.
Comments?
Congratulations, Mr. Heath. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion that we move him out of the probationary status.
Support.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Cummings. Roll call?
Mr. Palmer,
Yes.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes.
Mr. Cummings,
Yes.
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. Treasurer seasonal employee.
Okay, I know, it seems like we talk about this a lot. I know at the last meeting that we talked about it, and I presented a staff comparison to other townships and cities because I thought it would be more useful than a time study because nobody's worked in the treasurer's office except for the clerk. John has worked in that office on the board. Even though I've invited many people on the board to come in and see what we do, nobody is taking us up on that offer. So I presented 14 different comparisons, and Mr. Palmer brought up Comstock, Grand Haven, and Texas Township. Actually, I forgot about looking up Texas Township, but the Comstock and Grand Haven, I sent that information to the board members in regards to that, and it still seems that our township is still understaffed. We were in the top 3 of the now 16 townships that I presented to the board, and the 2 top ones ahead of us have 5 full-time people or 3 full-time people plus a part-time person in their office. And all I'm asking, and I asked this on Friday for the board, to reconsider hiring my seasonal part-time person for the 880 hours for the week, and it's a $10 an hour job. So, and we only use them seasonally for the high peak periods, because that's really all we need to have them for, because otherwise we're sending them home with nothing to do. I do want to express, though, one of the concerns that Aaron brought up in his 51-page document, and that we have had in past audit things about segregation of duties. We are now compromising that with just Jane and I being in the office, because we do the deposits, and now we are handling the cash at the counter as well. Where before we had the separation of duties where somebody was handling the cash at the counter and the other person was doing the deposits. That is no longer happening. So if we don't have somebody there, then some other type of arrangements are going to have to be made to meet that criteria. I've asked before if this board has intentions of realigning the treasurer's office. This is why they don't want to hire the part-time person. I've gotten no response into that regard. So I'm just looking for direction or for you to reconsider that position. It would be greatly appreciated.
Comments? You have a proposed motion?
I propose that we reinstate the budget, it's already budgeted still, I believe, in the budget for the treasurer's office for the personal, or for the seasonal part-time position at the 880 hours for the year, at the rate that, of 1040, I believe it was, per hour. Post it.
Support.
Post it and find somebody to fill the position.
Okay, so that's your motion?
That is my motion.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Byer. Roll call?
Could I have a
Yes.
moment? I just want to make sure that 1040, I know last time we went through this,
Right, is it 1040 or 1020?
I'd rather just put
What's
it-
the
the
step?
wage scale. Yeah, I
Okay,
just,
wage
as
scale's
the
fine.
wage scale, as determined in the wage.
Yeah, I really don't want to keep bringing this back to the board.
Me either, yeah.
Quick
At the
question.
appropriate step.
At the appropriate.
What is the appropriate
That's
step?
what I was gonna, that's what I asked for a moment to look for. So I can look it up.
Something.
I just
What's
want
the
to,
step, though? Is that step 0, step 1, step 2?
I would say whatever the beginning one is 0 or 1. I know the seasonal pay rate is different than the regular pay scale.
depends on the individual. If you're to bring the previous individual back, it'd be a different
Right.
step than if someone started at the starting point. That was my only thought in using the term at the appropriate step. But
With
you've
the budget,
indicated
I'm,
you
loo-
can't.
I'm looking at page 50 of the budget, and it shows, no, it doesn't have that position on that one.
And Ms. McGuire, you've mentioned that the previous employee is not coming back, correct? It's
Correct,
not an
that was
option,
what
so
caused the
it-
problem that I mentioned on Friday. I had him scheduled to come back to finish out because we were closed down for the COVID, so he didn't get to finish his 6 months. I had him scheduled back, the board members did not want me to bring him back, so then I had to let him know he couldn't come back to work on Monday. And then I had to wait 2 weeks for the board meeting and presented this spreadsheet. And then they approved him only for 2.5 months. And when I let him know that, he had already found another job. So in order to post the job, to hire somebody, to train them for 2.5 months, the 2 months would be over by the time, yeah, it was.
So the starting step, and that's what it's referenced in the compensation plan included in the budget, it's called the starting step, and that's at $10.20. Page 51 of the budget.
51. All right. Oh, treasurer's, okay,
Yeah,
treasurer's
yeah.
assistant, I got
Treasury
you.
assistant on
That
the
is correct.
seasonal. Step 1 would be 1040, so I just wanted to make the clarification before we move on.
So starting will be what?
1020.
1020.
All right, roll call.
Okay, and I'm sorry, the motion and the support still.
Motion by Ms. McGuire, support by Mr. Byer.
Mr. Byer,
Yes.
Mr. Palmer,
No.
Ms. McGuire,
Yes,
Mr. Cummings,
No,
Mr. Nordine, yes, Mr. Weed.
Yes, motion's passed. All right, now we're into our second public comment period. A card does not need to be filled out. And there's still a 4-minute time limit. Please introduce yourself when you come to the podium. Does anybody wish to speak?
Again, my name hasn't changed, it's still Clayton Jolly, Senior. One of the things that came up, and I here to get some verification of that is that the township ran township water lines on the west side of Van Etten Lake. And that the hookups to that water line were paid for by the township, and I wondered if that was true or not. And if it is, why that courtesy, if you will, wasn't extended to those of us on the east side of the lake. Can anybody give me an answer, or?
We don't respond during public comment.
I see.
Anybody else wish to speak?
Follow up. My comments weren't intended to pile on Jamie. You're our chief financial officer, but accounting is pretty simple. Debits on the left, credits on the right. You have a checkoff list each month for your journal entries and for what accounts need to be reconciled. Each year, the auditors are going to find something new. And if they can't, they're going to dig for something, no matter how obtruse, to try and show you that they found something. So each year, you add whatever they find to your closing schedule so that unless there's a major change in GASB pronouncements, that's the government accounting audit standards, there should be no journal entries. And if there is, it's going to be, and I hate cliches, one of those perfect storm situations. And when you sat there, you talk to them, and it turns out, you go, oh, I thought you said this is how we do, and they go, no, no, no. That stuff happens. Doing accounting for 40 years, you're always going to have invoices disappear. They get in a desk drawer, but you put places in chance. You put procedures in chance to minimize the reoccurrence. I have a subscription to the Surgeon 1-year CPE classes online. I'm willing to share that with the township and the municipalities. You may want to consider having a round robin with the various ones, and you can meet your peers and talk. One thing we're good on, I think we have a very good website in terms of what happens, our pamphlets, our documents. On the other hand, Oscoda County, they've been better than us in terms of minimal audit comments. With the Elite's accident in January, we've seen the implosion that's happening with Oscoda. No bids on contracts. The audit keeps on slipping. A commissioner says that's above my pay grade. That's going to go over real big with Boeing, Lockheed, and Virgin when they come to town. That's it. Basically, I hate the football analogy. You're our safety. Most companies on large POs, they've already agreed what the purchase order should be coded to, but mistakes happen. So if it gets through, it gets through, but put procedures in place so it doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak? All right, then we're on to board comments. Anybody have anything?
Yeah, I have a comment. I had a question back in April about a payment to our sewer and water engineering firm that handles our sewer and water facilities, and we are on a contract with them. We pay that monthly. It's approximately a little over $50,000. It's split half equally between the water fund and the sewer fund. And that bill was, for January, was not paid until April. And I questioned why that was. I didn't really receive a good answer. I did get an email that showed that the F&V, Catherine from F&V, had sent the invoice directly to the treasurer's office and cross-copied Mr. Schaefer and Tammy on that. In a recent newspaper article, there was some language that kind of indicated that perhaps that was Mr. Schaefer's fault, that it was coded improperly or whatever. So I would like to have Mr. Schaefer talk a little bit about this and the allegations that were leveled at him in that article, if you wouldn't mind.
You want to say anything before? Jamie? No?
That's up to you, Dave.
I don't know. We had a conversation on Thursday that.
Yes, we did.
You might say something.
No, that wasn't the conversation. First of
Okay.
all, well, no, I'm not going to, actually. I'm not saying anything. I'm not doing the political thing, I already told you that.
Okay, yeah, and
Okay.
I want to stay out of the
Okay.
political thing.
Then stay out of it.
Well, I guess I expressed frustration to the reporter that I was not contacted by them to say anything about the article. I guess I was a little disappointed that I wasn't consulted as far as, this documentation or what the problems were. And I think since I started here in June of 2018, I have actually instituted a couple processes that help make sure that the budget is administered correctly, that we have safeguards in place that we're gonna move money before we start running lines negative and figure it out at the end of the year. That's not how I want to operate, and we're going to implement a financial management software system that makes the department heads put requisitions in place and code those line items before they can even ask for expenditures. And that's going to be an electronic process that is more efficient and more effective and communicates clearly as far as what the expectations are from the start of the purchasing process to the end, when it's actually loaded into accounts payable. As far as the purchase orders, Mr. Miller kind of mentioned the purchase orders, but we're gonna institute a system where the purchase orders actually talk to the accounting software, so that you can't make a requisition until you identify what it is, the line. And that's gonna eliminate a lot of confusion between the treasurer's office and the department head and myself to administer the budget, and it'll be loaded in electronically for the clerk to see as well, and have an electronic process to go through the approval process. So I think I was a little taken back that none of those improvements, as far as the budget or the actual purchasing process, were not mentioned in there. So we have identified the issues. We're moving forward on solutions. And I think that the solutions that are being implemented are gonna save everybody a lot of time and energy and frustration. And instead of initialing all the different bills, we're simply gonna load that into a system, and it's gonna go through a queue to be able to have the approvals. And I would love for the auditors to be able to come in and get a sign-in only access where they can only read that system and they can go through and test till their heart's content. And as a former auditor, that's exactly what I want. I want to be able to see everything electronically and test everything till my heart's content. So, I don't know, that'll increase transparency as well. So I guess there's several different improvements that we're putting in place to address these things, and that's happened since I started in 2018. So we keep going round and round and round, and we're trying to make improvements, and we have implementation dates for the end of August and then mid-September. So I guess that's a synopsis of the improvements that we're making.
Any other comments?
Yes, I wanted to provide an update from the last meeting. There was a discussion about bond rating, and I just wanted to share an email exchange that we've had amongst the board members here with you guys, so that you were all aware of it. I was going to be getting with Jamie after the last meeting to get a clarification about the bond rating comment that came up, because I didn't think we'd had one. But regardless of that, what I did is I reached out to a gentleman named Tom Traciak at Baker Tilly Municipal Advisors, the same person that Jamie had reached out to. But when I saw his response, it wasn't clear to me what exactly the clarification was trying to be. So I reached out to him and I posed 3 questions to which he responded. The first question was, has Oscoda Township ever had a bond rating? His response was no. A bond rating is a specific letter grade. These run from low to high for investment grade BBB, A, AA, AAA. Of course, it is possible that there was a rating at some point prior to my 25 years' experience with the township. This is, again, him speaking. But I'm not aware of it. There's been no reason to obtain a township rating since everything that has been done has been a placement and not sold to a broker, a dealer, that would need an official statement, prospectus, and rating, which most of us who have ever done any kind of investment are familiar with. The second question was, can you confirm the, quote, investment grade that was completed for Oscoda Township was simply a quicker, cheaper, and cursory alternative to the costly and more time-consuming bond rating process? His response was correct. We did this for the State Revolving Fund, what we call the SRF, program that only requires demonstration that the township is, quote, investment grade, and does not require a bond rating, meaning one of the specific letter grades. We obtained a rating assessment, which is a cursory review by S&P. This is not a continued assessment and under surveillance by, but rather is just a snapshot in time. In comparison, a bond rating is with a letter is continually reviewed by S&P, because that prospectus that you would be getting from your financial advisor or from a broker would have to be true today as it was the day it was printed. So that's where the continual review comes into place. And then finally, the last question was, if we were to ever have had a bond rating, would public comments by board members be likely to affect the bond rating as much as our official audit reports? His response was, I will answer your question this way. S&P never requests minutes of meetings or internal or external communication. So I don't know how they would ever become aware of that. They review audit, budget, pension, investment policy, capital improvement plans, and other such documents. In my 30-plus years with hundreds of communities, I've never seen S&P refer to public comments, or for that matter, any pending issues, unless they reach the level of audit or bond disclosure. So basically, the concern that was waged at the meeting was that comments that Mr. Weed was making were somehow going to cause negative impact to our community, and that we should squelch the comments and criticisms. And I have just now shown to you that that is not a plausible argument. I did have one other comment here, and it is in response to the newspaper article to which I am the unnamed trustee that was involved in the phone system upgrade, for which I was accused of miscoding a invoice to the wrong account, for which there was then no money. So I wanted to just respond by saying, and by the way, you can take these papers and pass them all down. Each board member can get a copy. Mr. Schaefer, a copy for you, and a copy for the press. Equal airtime here. What you'll notice on the first page here is a purchase order. This purchase order was completed let's see, it's on the 22nd of October 2019, and it's for a custom rack for $1,900. Page 2 is an email thread. I'll start at the bottom by pointing out that on the November 25th, I received an invoice from the vendor for the precise amount of the purchase order, which was $1,900. And on that, at that time, it was 1:56 p.m., just as a quick point here, 1:56 p.m. I received this invoice. By 2:30 p.m., I forwarded it to Mr. Schaefer for his approval and to get the payment process moving. At that point, within an hour and a half, Mr. Schaefer has then sent it to Jane Hackborn, the Deputy Treasurer, citing the invoice, the amount to be paid, the approval, and the account number, in other words, the line item, which you often hear us refer to. And then he forwards that email to me with that same attachment showing me that this has all been done all by 5:01 that exact same day. So a process that took less than 3 hours. The invoice is page 3. That's the invoice. The invoice, you'll notice on this particular copy, has no writing on it. It's purely the copy that was sent to us by the vendor. The invoice that was received by my request of the treasurer indicates circles around the date of November 25th, 2019. Several comments about emailed and no money in budget in these comments. Now, what you'll notice that what I'm about to say here is that is the sort of the shoe dropping the floor. The next page of this packet that I'm forwarding you here is that it was 3 months later to the date that I get an email from the vendor asking me, please let us know the status of the payment for the attached past due invoice. So I email that directly to our superintendent, again, 2 hours later after receiving this email, asking, Dave, it's my understanding this invoice was approved last fall. Can you confirm it was coded and forwarded to Treasury? I took the time then to explain to the vendor that I went over to Township Hall this afternoon and found that the invoice was never paid and the original invoice could not be located. I'm not sure where the breakdown occurred, but I personally approved your invoice for payment. The next check run, and what I mean by is I printed the invoice, the one that I was referring to that I received from Treasury, with my signature, with the approved for payment, with the correct line number noted, and back to my email. The next check run will be approved, in the next check run, this will be approved by the Board of Trustees for the 2nd of March, which will occur on the 2nd of March. They meet twice a week on the 2nd and 4th Monday. My apologies. She was very happy that I received and provided her quick turnaround. And so then what I would like to point out here is that in the reports that I have in my packet, the first one that comes from our BSNA software, this is a run that is dated the 31st of October 2019. This would have been the prior month to when this particular invoice was received. And on a particular line, third from the bottom on this report, called Building Improvements, which corresponds to, ironically, the line item number that I coded on that invoice. On that date, there was $16,462.20. So had that invoice been processed that day, there was more than enough money to pay a $1,900 bill. Just as a point, by the time that the fiscal year ended, which is December 31st, the next report shows that there was still $3,735.19 in that line item. Again, the one that is named on the invoice. So now fast forwarding to the end of February. At this point, the only thing I can imagine occurred in the treasurer's office was that when they went to pay the bill, they looked under the 2020 budget, not the 2019 budget, which is where this money was allocated. That's where these all have to be expended. This money is essentially encumbered into a prior year budget. And so as a result, there would have been possibly no money for that, in this particular line item. But it just so happens, the report comes back and says that there's $12,500 in that line item. So I have no idea where the multiple reports of no money available or the incorrect account number, are coming from, but I can show you with my report that it's not true. I don't try to make chaos in financial matters. I take my job as a project manager pretty seriously, and I'm very familiar with accounting, and I deal with multi-million-dollar budgets, multiple multi-million-dollar budgets, simultaneously for decades. So I have no problem with that. So that is the end of my comment.
Anybody have anything else?
I have a question. Well, not a question, just a statement, actually. My only question to you, Tim, is when you asked me for that invoice and you had that information, why didn't you come to me with this information?
Didn't have that information at the time. I actually had forgotten about the email, to be honest with you.
But you had time to put together all this and not come and call me or come back into
Just
the
like
office
you-
to see our side of the
You're
emails
absolutely
and
right,
stuff?
Jamie. I didn't
You're
come to see
right.
you because I didn't want another backroom deal where we're going to have this conversation quietly in your office where
It's
there
not a
is no
backroom deal.
transparency.
No, really? Spare me.
Absolutely, really.
No, it's all one-sided.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
The numbers really are that way. I think your victim mentality is self-created, sweetheart.
Wow.
Thank you.
Whoa, victim mentality.
Oh,
Love
boo. Go balance a checkbook. It's not a victim.
Do we
Whoa,
have,
excuse me?
do we have any other board comments?
Yes, I do. On a very small, on a totally different topic. A couple of times, maybe three, here during the course of this meeting, Aaron referred to Eagle, and I think Rick did too. Grant monies that were or were not available. Eagle did this or Eagle said that. Just so everybody understands, that's a new organization in Lansing that used to be partially what all of us knew as the DNR, the Department of Natural Resources, plus what, some other things too? No?
No, Eagle was.
DEQ, yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah. Anything else other than the DEQ?
the DEQ was renamed to Eagle.
Okay, strictly that, okay. So, that's what the Eagle is, and I apologize, not the DNR, it's DEQ. And the second thing is, I guess if you're in public life, you expect to get hammered a little bit, but tonight, earlier, we had a couple of people that were unhappy with us and rude remarks like, what was it, super weed or something like that, I guess what I'm getting at is, if you're unhappy with this board, step up and run for office. Replace us. There is a chance. You have 3 more days. On the 16th of July, there is, that's the deadline for registering nonpartisan if you want to be an independent for any of the offices. And 1 or 2 of the offices, you know, I've been out of town here, so I'm not sure if this is accurate, but 1 or 2 of the offices only have 1 candidate now, you know, and you only need 3 to 10 signatures. It's not some kind of big deal, you know. So you have 3 days to think about this and get the proper paperwork from our distinguished clerk. It's an easy thing to do. 3 signatures. You can get your kids to do it or something if they're old enough, so, anyway.
The bar is actually, I hate to interrupt you, the bar is 9 for
Nine
non-required.
signatures.
Oh, it's 9
It's a
for this?
little higher, yeah, a little
Okay.
bigger lift, but
Well, that's 2 mistakes I've made tonight here. I should shut up.
I hate
So I will. Did it used to be 3?
not, the partisan
When it's
office.
partisan.
Oh,
Partisan.
for partisan
It goes up when it's
elections.
independent.
And the deadline for that was in April, so this is a little higher. Okay.
Anybody else have anything?
I guess I'll mention that along the election line, absentee ballots are available in the clerk's office. We've had some questions about if we've received absentee ballot applications. We have. The turnout absentee has increased a lot, so we're processing through applications, and some ballots have already been mailed. We're in the process of mailing more. So if you've already sent in an application, you should expect to see a ballot here shortly. If you haven't turned in an application, you desire to vote absentee, you can call, email, or come into the township clerk's office, and we can help you out with that.
Anything else? Okay, I want to say that the requisitions process that Mr. Schaefer was talking about was brought about by Mr. Schaefer and being implemented by Mr. Schaefer, so I appreciate you doing that. That's something that should have been done a very long time ago. You have done a lot to help out this township. You've brought a lot of solutions here, so I really appreciate the work you've done.
You're here.
You've been a godsend to us. There's also been talk going around about Furtaw Field and invoices and stuff like that, and that about where I'm leading the board regarding the township building being put on Furtaw Field. They want answers, and so I've already answered those questions during the work sessions that we had at Warrior Pavilion. So I would like the board members to address it. Where are you guys at regarding the expenses we had towards looking into a new township building?
Well, I think there were certain expenses in this overall process of determining what our current township hall situation was. So we had to have some assessment done there, and that's a fee. That's not a free charge. Architect was contacted to give some ideas about what a facility like that might look like, wherever it might be. I was as surprised as anybody when they said that this board had decided that it was going to be on Furtaw Field. That whole project has sort of been put on hold because of the Rona here. We, not being able to have town hall meetings and meet in person to discuss these issues. That whole project has sort of been put on the back burner, and quite frankly, I would like to see us take that up at a later date, because I think it's important. We've determined that our fire department, police department need more space. I had pushed, when I first got on the board, pushed to have our former community center open. I was pushing to have it open year-round, and met opposition with that, and I guess rightfully so, because that building was not really appropriate for our needs, and it cost a fortune to operate. So we were able to sell that building to Coletta, which I think was a good move, and we are holding on to that money. I still would like to see Oscoda Township have a community center and have it year-round, and I think the way to do that is to incorporate that similar to what Tawas, East Tawas did with their community center and offices, to have them, the township offices in a building along with the community center, and that way, you know, and be able to have it open year-round. We do not need a building the size of our former community center to function as a viable community center for our township. So if a determination's been made that Furtaw Field is a spot, then it was done without my knowledge. I will say that my personal preference is for Furtaw Field. I think it's the ideal spot for that sort of a facility. It will bring people to the downtown area on a regular basis. We had a number of people that, you know, participated in our community center. I think if we had a new community center on Furtaw Field, we would see a good many people using that. Just one example is our pickleballers. They would be in there using that facility on a regular basis. That brings people to the downtown, going into the, you know, businesses and restaurants and things in that area. But that has to be a board decision. We have to look at all the properties that are available where this could go. And of course now, with the Alcona Health Center being under construction, I guess a lot of people were questioning whether that was even going to happen or not. Well, we can see now that that is going to happen. And some developers that we've talked to, the block where our current Township Hall is located becomes a very prime spot for development with that new Alcona Health Center. So that we've actually had some developers that said that would be a nice spot to put a number of different things at that location. So that's my thoughts on what you were talking about for the, you know, the bills. We did have some road engineering did some work for us, preliminary work for this municipal center, and the architect did some work for some preliminary ideas of what a building of that nature would consist of, to get some ideas of the cost. And those are all things that have to be done before you can take any action on anything. So I don't understand where anybody's thinking that Mr. Weed has made a decision and is somehow secretly pushing something through that just simply isn't the case. So.
Well, not only isn't it the case, it's not possible.
Yeah. Right.
You know, a single individual, no matter how rogue, no matter how whatever, couldn't possibly get an expenditure through this township without the proper approval. I mean, it requires paperwork, it requires signatures. We got a treasury that's got to have to write a check. I mean, you can't do it. That's the reason why this board is organized the way it is. That's why we have a treasurer and a clerk. It's that separation of duties that prevents that kind of a fraudulent or corrupted activity from occurring. That's the purpose. So the insinuation is ludicrous. They need to go back and recall their American government lessons from Mr. Byer.
No, it only takes a 4-3 vote.
Poor old Mr. Byer gets blamed for everything.
So who approved those expenditures?
I believe the board did.
The board would, that's right.
Yep.
That's correct.
And if I'm not mistaken, it was a 7-0 vote.
That's correct.
Does anybody have a problem with the presentations that were given at those work sessions?
Yes,
Okay, what are they?
you didn't give us the stuff ahead of time. You got up there and did your presentation, so board members weren't prepared to ask questions.
At those slideshows?
The first one you did, the second one, we didn't get it ahead of time.
Okay, so the first one, You and I did sit down and go through the presentation.
That's correct. The
Okay.
second one, never got it.
Was there new material that you didn't understand?
It was new material. It's all
Okay.
new slideshow.
All right.
Did you get it?
I don't recall, actually. To be honest, I remember when, my viewpoint is, regardless,
You came
I
in
don't
late.
remember. I just don't know. When I get to the meeting, I feel it's fine. I mean, it's like I'm participating in the meeting. It's a work session. So,
Did you have a problem with with
I
the
didn't go
slideshow,
unprepared.
with the
It was a while
information that
ago.
was in it?
So I don't know. I didn't have time to prepare to ask any questions, simply. And
I
I
can
do
s-
believe I did ask questions even without having it ahead of time.
sure.
Was any of the information false?
I can't speak to that right at this moment.
I don't remember anybody
dude.
giving us wrong information about
And I'm not
First
gonna
Off
debate
Field.
this. This is board comment. So if you're
Right.
finished making your comments, Aaron, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
No, I'm not finished. Was any of the information false?
Not that I was aware of.
No?
Okay.
Nope. I don't. I'm not aware of any.
I wasn't there. I was tending to one of my family members that kind of needed me at that time, so.
Yes, sir. That's right.
Okay. Now I'm done. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you for coming out.